Hey, so I am really excited to do this chat series with the candidates that are running for elected office in our surrounding areas. And I really just wanted to give everyone an opportunity to get to know these candidates better, and also for them to talk about some of the issues that they are championing, and just to give us an idea of what their vision is for once they're elected to office. And I'm very excited to have Mr. Chris Benton here with me for this first chat. And we're going to get into learning some more about him and about the issues that he feels are important to his constituents. So if you don't mind, Chris, if you could just go ahead and give everyone your name, the office you're running for, and the area that it covers.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me today. I'm Chris Benton. I'm running for House District 131, which is the Georgia House. My district covers all of Pike, all of Upson, and South Lamar County, basically Barnesville and South.
Okay. And about how many constituents does the area cover as far as
A typical House district is between 34 and 38,000 votes.
Okay. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Yeah, I'm married to my better half, Jolie. We have 2 kids. We have 3 rescue pets. We live in Thomaston, Georgia. Uh, I work in telecommunications, which is a fancy way of saying I work from home doing networking type stuff. This is an opportunity that I hope more folks have as we can expand wireless internet, and we'll talk about our high-speed internet. We'll talk about that later. And I like to dedicate my time to organizations that help promote social and racial justice. Most notably, locally, I'm a member of the Upson NAACP, and I also joined the NAAGA, which helps African Americans with gun ownership, because I'm a big proponent of responsible gun ownership, but we have big organizations who tend to not favor minorities when it comes to gun ownership, and I think that's wrong. And it was a big deal, and it's also headquartered in Griffin, Georgia, which is fantastic.
Okay, wow, definitely. That's awesome, and I would love actually to get that information so I can share with everyone on Facebook that may be interested in being a part of that as well, because that is definitely something that we're kind of it's not the same. It's not equal in how you think about the NRA being such huge proponents for a certain population and not so much for Black people. So yeah, that's definitely a huge issue, and I'd love to share that information with everyone. So can you tell us what are some of your favorite places to spend time in your district? Well, COVID, when you could actually do things,
yes.
Yeah.
I will tell you that I'm a homeless first. I lucky enough to be a homeowner, and hope that more folks are able to can become homeowners in the future. And then around the district, some of the places I love being on the campus of Gordon State. My wife attends college there. I have great conversations with young folks who are becoming more engaged in politics. It's one of those eye-opening things where you get to hear like issues that affect them that you may not necessarily think about all the time, and what gets them involved. And it helps, because when you hear the things that are on them, it helps you shape a better idea of what you want to do as a representative at any level of government.
I definitely admire that, and that's very true. Um, to know that you're so involved, because that's the only way you can actually find out what those concerns are from your constituents, when you're involved in these different organizations, or you're making sure that you're attending these meetings and actually asking the people, what is it that is most important to you, to help you be more productive or increase your quality of life, what is it that I can do to make sure that becomes a reality? So I think that's very, very important, definitely. So let me ask, when we're talking about your constituents and you're out talking to people in the community, can you tell me which word comes to mind first when you think of your constituents? Would you say taxpayer or citizen?
Definitely citizen. The the one thing that I love about our rural district is that our community has, it's just special. Folks really care about each other. You don't really hear people talk about ideas as, oh, I'm a taxpayer, and you hear it, but people are actively engaged in the community in different types of issues and constituencies. But and then when I think about taxation, just briefly, I always explain it to people like this. Taxation is just folks working together to achieve a common goal. Like, you want to have nice streets, we all throw in a few bucks and we get to drive on nice streets without potholes on them. We want a fire department that will come out if your house is burning down. We all throw in a few bucks and we have, a well-staffed fire department with equipment to come and help should you need them. And when you explain it that way, folks say, oh, now I understand. It's just all of us working together to achieve a common goal that we wouldn't be able to afford separately.
Right, right. And I think a lot of politicians don't differentiate the two. So it's very nice to hear you say how you look at it in your perspective on the difference. So what do you think are some of the issues that your constituents in your district are concerned about?
Well, campaigning has been more difficult with COVID, but we still have our avenues. We have social media. I do have some events that we're able to go and speak with folks at. And the two issues that come up more often than not in our district is high-speed internet, which we have very large parts of the district with no internet or very, very slow internet that doesn't really help them accomplish the things they need to do in healthcare, especially medication costs. There's a lot of folks in our district who, even if they can see a doctor, they can't afford their medication. The doctor says they need, they can't afford testing that they need. And that's with insurance. So we have to do a better job of making healthcare affordable. It's more than just, it's a moral issue. And we have to decide, whatever we have to do to make this happen, we have to make it happen.
And I'm actually glad that you brought up the issue of healthcare because there's this debate about whether people believe access to healthcare is a right for citizens. And under this new proposal that Governor Kemp just proposed to the Trump administration, any Georgians that are seeking to purchase health insurance would no longer have the option of shopping for plans on healthcare.gov, and they'd have to seek out commercial insurance plans on their own. Can you tell me how do you feel about that issue?
I'm very much against it. When you remove the protections that the ACA affords us, one thing that happens is insurers can start discriminating against pre-existing conditions once you remove us from the umbrella of the ACA. And that's a big deal because when you get, look, I'm 41, right? I'm not old by any means, but every once in a while I have things that have to be managed just like a lot of folks do. And bringing those issues to a new insurance can cause your bill to be very high, or they just won't cover those issues at all. And we've come too far on that issue to turn back now. And a lot of folks don't remember what it was like before 2010 if you had a bad back, or if you had like constant migraines, any number of issues. And I think people really need to look at what it means to remove us from the ACA. yes, the ACA has some issues, but you can't just replace it with nothing. You have to have a plan to make sure folks can have affordable health care. We don't discriminate against pre-existing conditions, and that we make sure that all that, like, and medications are also taken care of.
All right, and I totally agree. Going back to one of the concerns being access to internet, especially for the children in the rural school systems. What do you think the state government should do, if anything, to help provide an equitable, quality public education for children during the pandemic?
Well, working to fix the internet issue is job one. I mean, it's not just for education, but that's where it starts, because the COVID issue highlighted the troubles in the rural school districts have if we can't have in-face learning. There are kids who just don't have access to the internet. You can't do distance learning without access to the internet. I mean, they're working through some great teachers who put out lesson plans that they're mailing to folks, and they're handling some lessons over the phone, but that's not feasible on a large scale. So fixing the internet is job number one, and then making sure that our school districts have the resources they need to assist with the distance learning, whether it's things like Chromebooks or other access to like websites and such that help promote the learning. It's important, and we have to make sure at the state level that we're providing them those resources.
I totally agree with that as well. I think this pandemic has definitely brought those issues to the forefront, and the sooner we're able to come up with solutions to the issue, the better off, because I don't think that this situation is going away anytime soon. So we definitely need to be trying to work towards those solutions for this particular issue. What ideas do you have about how to involve your constituents in the decision-making process when you're in office?
Oh, wow, that's a great question. Two things: education and access. One thing that happens is that folks are really disconnected about what's actually going on in the state house. And we have to do a better job of getting that information out. And that includes social media, emailing, texting, town halls. However you can communicate that to folks, people need to know, and you have to reach them where they're at with what's going on there. And then you have to have the two-way communication. So you have to have access to you. And that doesn't mean that you take calls 24 hours a day, but it means that you can reach me, email, social media, town halls where we have two-way communication, texting, all those sorts of things that allow you to give me the feedback to represent you the best in Atlanta.
Okay, yeah, I think that's definitely true. I think we don't have enough of those small community conversations and in town hall meetings to where the elected officials really get to connect with the people one-on-one, to show that they're listening and to show that they actually care about what their constituents are dealing with. And I think a lot of times what happens with those that we have in office now is that they don't listen to understand, they listen to respond. And I think we have to get back to listening to understanding the issues, essentially. Can you tell us what you think your first 90 days in office would look like?
It will be hectic. As a freshman in the Georgia House, I will be learning a lot. I will be making sure that I have a good team together. But the one thing I want to do in the first 90 days, which is basically the whole session, as you know, the Georgia House only meets for about 8 weeks a year, is building those relationships with the representatives right around me. And I'm not just talking about Democrats, because I'm a Democrat, but Democrats and Republicans. On the west side of my district is the district of House Minority Leader Bob Trammell. But on the east side is Robert Dickey, who owns this farm down south, and very staunch Republican. But we all represent rural districts, and our concerns are mutual. And I want to build those relationships to where when we push legislation through, it's bipartisan. I can go to Bob and I can go to Robert and say, let's get this done. And that's where my first session, I'll spend my time out, is building those relationships.
Yes, I think relationships are very important. And what people don't realize is it does take the reaching across the aisle to work together to ensure that the legislation that needs to be passed actually gets passed. And it's not just collecting dust somewhere on the shelf. So those relationships are definitely needed to get through a lot of the things that we think are important to us. Going back to the pandemic and how hard small businesses have been affected, can you tell me what would be your top 3 priorities for small business owners if you're elected?
Wow, that's a fantastic question. It really starts with, first, we need to make sure that we can help the economic environment recover as quickly as possible. Whatever we can do to get people back to work, get folks spending money again, bring in outside money to the state. That's job number 1, because when folks are spending money, our small businesses prosper. 2 is just access to capital. We have these community development financial institutions that are private institutions, but they're a lot of times supported through policy that loan money specifically to small business owners who are in rural areas, or Black and brown owned businesses, or female owned businesses that are getting started, and it helps these folks get off the ground and have the money they need to make their dream happen. And the great thing is they provide very low interest rates, they're affordable capital. That's a huge deal to any small business owner, especially when you're started, but then we have COVID come, and it's hard to plan for something like that. And then last, just making sure that we have a quality, skilled, healthy workforce. When you're a small business owner and say you want to start an IT company, you got to make sure you have the folks trained who can get that done. And in Georgia, we need to do a better job of making sure that we have training both through high school and in post-secondary training.
That's awesome. Yeah, I definitely agree with that wholeheartedly. And also, I don't want to dwell on the whole doom and gloom mindset, but I wanted to ask, because we know how this attack on the scientific and medical community went. With the pandemic, how would you support legislative solutions to essentially safeguard the scientific integrity and hold state agencies accountable for ensuring that the science isn't sidelined from the process of protecting public health, safety, and the environment for Georgia citizens?
Oh, well, now you're asking the hard questions. As far as a legislative remedy, the General Assembly in Georgia is a little bit limited to what you can force the governor and his administration to do. So the bigger question is overall, how do you make this not an issue going forward? And I think one is just the education. We need to have an educated, informed populace so that folks are getting the right information. They understand how to discern what is real information, what's disinformation, and hold their elected officials accountable. And the second part of that is making sure that we protect and have free and fair elections, so that when it comes time to put these folks in office, that the right people are getting elected by the will of the people, not through gerrymandering and voter suppression, keeping folks in office who are just not, to be able to continue that accountability issue.
Okay. So let's talk about some of the issues we're touching on with voter suppressions and things like that, particularly in the Black community, but also with things like gerrymandering. Do you believe that it's a huge problem in the state of Georgia that is helping to basically erode the democratic process?
Gerrymandering is a big issue everywhere. It's not just in Georgia, and it's not, but it's especially pronounced here in other states like North Carolina, who actually have their maps redrawn, Virginia, who had some redrawing the maps. And I'll give a great example of what happens when we gerrymander a district to favor a party. And we can look at Georgia Congressional District 14. Don't know if folks are familiar with it, but the Republicans, this is a district that's been gerrymandered to be heavy Republican. And the primary winner in that district was Marjorie Greene, who is a white nationalist, a QAnon conspiracy theorist believer, just really out there. Mm-hmm. And she won that primary. And she is going to most likely go on to win that district. Just generally because it's hard to reach so many folks that you can do a lot of swing voting. So when it comes to general elections, if you don't know a whole lot about a person, you're generally inclined to vote party lines. And where it's making very far left and right leaning candidates win offices because people are identifying party wise when it comes to general election, and the real race is in the primary. And primary voters are by far much less than a general election. So we're allowing a small section of folks to determine our representation, and right. We have to stop the only way to do that is to end gerrymandering.
Right. Yeah, there it's one of those situations where people just don't realize how important their voices are, especially when it comes to things like filling out the census, to ensuring that they're being counted within that population. For those types of different types of funding to be available based on those numbers, different types of program initiatives that can be done, and overall combating these different types of issues where you have the opposition trying to silence your voice, essentially. So yes, those things are extremely important. I want to move on and talk about one of the things that is that I think is near and dear to you, about supporting the decriminalization of cannabis. So let's talk about that, and what type of plan do you have to help push legislation for that at the state level?
Ending cannabis prohibition in Georgia is it will be such a big win for the state, and it's going to happen. We just want to make sure it happen sooner than later. I personally don't use cannabis either medicinally or socially, but a lot of the constituents do. And what it means for Georgia, number one, is criminal justice reform. We're going to stop locking folks up for cannabis. It's ridiculous. If you study the history of why it happens, you know it's completely based on race. That's why they made it illegal in the first place. That's number one. Number two is that what it does medicinally, and we're talking about vets who use it for PTSD, children who use it for seizures, and chronic pain patients, especially people like fibromyalgia. My wife actually has the card to have the oil for her chronic back pain. And these things separately are enough, but then we have the other advantages to it, that it will allow our small family farmers, if we completely end prohibition, to grow this cash crop, which we have the perfect weather for. And Georgia's economy is still powered through agriculture, but we tell our farmers, we're only going to let a few of you grow it, and we're going to charge you a crazy amount to have the right to grow it. And, you know, our farms around here can't afford it. I mean, basically, you're turning over to corporate farms. And then lastly, just the amount of jobs it will create. I mean, we're talking about middle-class jobs. You know, in Thomaston, we were excited about a Chick-fil-A opening, and everyone, you know, it's good chicken, right? But they're paying, you know, $9 an hour. And we're talking about an industry that will pay folks middle-class wages and thousands of new jobs and thousands of new businesses, creating wealth for folks who open dispensaries and manufacturing of cannabis. So there is such a huge win, and there are no drawbacks. So that's the thing. And we're not even discussing the organic public revenue that comes about it. You can stop raising taxes because it will increase the revenue that we earn. It will help our education. It will help our infrastructure. It's just, and I can go on all day, but it's a home run, and we need to make it happen as soon as possible.
In following on talking about the decriminalization of cannabis, and we all know the numbers, you know, the disproportionate number of Black people that are arrested as opposed to whites. And it's just one of those things that is mind-blowing, because you have a certain amount of states where it is legal, even for recreational purposes. And to think about the number of people that are incarcerated behind it, and even with it becoming legal, not having that retroactive application of getting rid of those criminal records, you know, essentially wiping them clean. What suggestion would you have for that going forward with trying to decriminalize cannabis here?
Oh, absolutely. Anyone that's in jail for only a cannabis-related offense, they need to get out immediately, and those records need to be expunged completely. Just the issue, it helps with them getting good-paying jobs, or just all of it. Just let them out, expunge your records.
I agree. You know, it's with being hindered from getting a job, even being able to rent an apartment. It's just so many things that it affects for, you know, essentially a plant that is becoming legal everywhere, you know? So yes, I think that's extremely, extremely important. So let's talk about when we're talking about how essentially making it legal can provide so many different areas of revenue and essentially middle class income. One of the issues that we have in the Black community is that, you know, years ago, when we had these jobs that were considered middle class, because, you know, especially here, having the mill towns where people essentially could make a very good living and be able to essentially get a part of what the American dream was considered to be. And now it's gotten to a point where, you know, that income has gone. There are not really many jobs here. As you know, most of the warehouses are essentially located in Henry County and in other areas. But one of the issues we face is that because these areas have become more so neglected, we find that gentrification is becoming a huge issue because these developers are able to come in and buy up these properties for basically pennies on the dollar. And then the actual older residents are forced out. So what do you think would be a good plan to ensure that these residents who are the most vulnerable continue to have access to affordable housing?
Really, these are such great questions. When you start considering the idea of affordable housing, like, I look at it as there's a temporary solution and then there's a long-term solution. Temporary solution is we have to make sure that folks are able to have a place over their head. We have like rent-controlled housing and public assistance, which is a very temporary form of making sure folks can stay in their homes. But the long-term solution is building up income and wealth for low-income rural folks, because everyone deserves to live in a nice place with a nice education system and, you know, a nice community with smooth roads, you know, with no potholes. And the answer isn't to keep an area depressed so that everything's affordable. The answer is help those people have the income and the wealth to have their areas be as nice as everywhere else. So gentrification is an issue, but it's an issue because we're not focused on the real problem, which is wealth and inequality and income inequality.
I agree. I do agree. I think that people take the human factor out of these decisions and don't understand that there's more than one solution, you know, to the problem. You know, if city and local governments want to revitalize an area, they can do that without displacing the current residents. I was actually the director of operations for Habitat, and it's amazing to me that everywhere doesn't adopt that model, you know, where you're putting in a program to help people achieve home ownership. You know, you're
Yes.
putting them through the financial literacy classes. You're enabling them to not only just work on their homes by building them, but building the homes of their future neighbors and actually having them invested in that process and in their property to instill a sense of pride in that. And I think that it's just something that people take the human factor out of, and they're just really concerned about the bottom line. So I agree with you that the big issue is basically income inequality in that sense. And it needs to be something that is definitely brought to the forefront. I agree. I definitely agree. So the hot topic that shouldn't be a hot topic, shouldn't even be an issue, but it's something that we're facing every day in the Black community, especially Black males with I don't even know how to form this question. How do you as a representative work with your colleagues to combat the number of Black people being killed or injured in encounters with law enforcement?
This is it's a issue that we have to fix now. It's not a new issue. It's just it's getting more exposure, and I'm glad that's getting exposure because that's how you get it fixed. We can well disagree, right? Starting out first is we have to have more and better education for our local police officers about how to handle certain situations, right? How to de-escalate, how to just the overall psychological training to do what they're asked to do, and ending a profiling. That's like the very first step. That's a bridge to the overall question as a representative. What are you going to do to have a long-term fix to this? Because we do ask our police officers to do almost an impossible job, right? So how do we bring the community and our policing together in a way that ends this crazy disparity? And to me, it starts with to reform the criminal justice system from being retribution-based to being rehabilitation-based. Like when you're writing laws, and we can go back to a perfect example of the Crime Bill of '94. The deterrent to crime was if you do the crime, you're going to get punished this way. The deterrent to crime needs to be, we need to be better citizens. We need to make better choices. We need to have empathy and understand what happens for our neighbors and for our community when you make bad choices. Mm-hmm. And as a person of faith, to me, if you work on making each other better, the crime and the other issues we have will take care of themselves. So as a legislator, when we're writing laws that come with criminal trespass issues, to me, we have to put the policies in place so that we're making folks better within the system. And we can do that. And it's something that we have to get started on as soon as we get in session next year.
I definitely agree. It's just people don't understand the trauma that comes along with it for us, because it's something we're dealing with every day. People don't understand what it's like to see someone that looks like you being murdered in cold blood. You know, it almost every day, because you get to see it because of, you know, social media and being able to take a video and just, you know, post it. And when I say, you know, it shouldn't be issues, because it shouldn't be happening. Right. And I think that it definitely goes back to how when something happens and a Black male is killed and you want to bring up his criminal background, but you're not bringing up the underlying issues for why. You know, we're not bringing up the poverty. We're not bringing up the education inequality, or we're not bringing up that there's issues with access to healthcare or actual, you know, job opportunities. And I think that, you know, what you just said is definitely how that approach should happen. And it's definitely something that the General Assembly needs to focus on. Definitely. I definitely agree. Well, what kinds of policies will you pursue to promote social and racial justice for those of us in the Black community?
Well, I'll give you a perfect example of one that is just really on my heart right now. I have a friend of mine, Dr. Joy Baker, who's a OBGYN, and she was in this area, but she recently moved down to Columbus. And she, through her activism, has really brought about the maternal mortality rate among Black women in the state. Georgia's the worst state, right? Like when it comes to healthcare outcomes, if you're a Black woman, you're 22% more likely to die of cardiovascular issues. You're 77% more likely to die of cervical cancer issues. You're 243% more likely to die during childbirth or through maternal issues than a white woman. That's, I don't even have the words, right? That's an issue that it just pains, like, pay attention to me, right? And this is a healthcare issue, right? And when we talk about justice, like sometimes we come around to like just like criminal justice, but to me, this is even a bigger travesty. I mean, just through the color of your skin, you're more likely to die giving birth. If you go to an ER, you're less likely to be taken seriously if you say you're in pain. Can you imagine going, and I'm sure you can, going to an ER and it's like, I'm in dire pain and not being facilitated just because of the color of your skin. That's got to be fixed. And access to healthcare is one thing, but also holding folks accountable for the type of education they have and how they profile their patients. That is something we have to seriously explore and make sure that we're taking care of folks no matter their gender or the color of their skin, especially with healthcare.
Yeah, I definitely agree. You know, my daughter is 4, and when I had her, I actually had to go through having a cesarean, and of course they don't even allow you to stay in the hospital very long, even though you just literally been cut open, you know, across your midsection. And I was only there for maybe 2 days before I was discharged to go home. And they literally thought that I was going to sit in the wheelchair with my daughter's heavy car seat carrier on top of me to get out of the hospital. And I'm like, are you serious right now? I'm in so much pain, I can barely move. You want me to sit this car seat on top of me? And how does that make sense at all? But it goes back to the issue of, hey, you can't really feel any pain. You know, I don't think this is bothering you at all. And that is so true, that to be experiencing the most beautiful moment in your life, but you could literally die because of neglect from your medical professionals is essentially, it's just disgusting to even know that that has been that has been how a lot of women have experienced childbirth, is to lose their lives or potentially be in a situation where they have they continue to have health issues because they were ignored. You know, it's definitely a huge issue. Um, Continuing on with talking about justice, would you support legislation for more diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives for state agencies?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, just we see the disparities. We see disparities in gender. Um, we see disparities in race. Um, not just in our in state agencies, but even in representation. Right.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the Georgia House is majority older white men, and that's just not representative of our state. So I think first off is we want to encourage more representation from more women and more Black and brown folks to run so that their issues are on the table. So it's one thing to relate, right? I can relate with you, but I'm not you. I haven't lived your experiences. So those are the things that we need to work on first, as representation, and then just putting in 20 years ago, they called it affirmative action. Whatever you want to call it, you want to make sure that we're increasing in a way that makes sure that it's reflective of the population all the way across the board. And that's from everything from police departments to infrastructure, all areas of government.
Right. Yeah, I think that it definitely should be something that essentially these should become like required programs. I don't know if you've seen how the Trump administration has just basically gone through and just gutted any type of these diversity and inclusion programs because they deemed them to be anti-American or divisive. And just like, so are we just going to ignore that racism exists? Are we just going to say that it doesn't? Because like you said before, you can't tell me about my experience, right? You can't tell me how to feel about something that I've experienced because, you haven't been in those shoes. And for them to basically say, oh, this is an issue, this isn't happening, that is just appalling to me. So I definitely think that these initiatives are extremely important and they definitely should become a part of trainings for different agencies as well. Another issue that I wanted to touch on is something that in the state of Georgia, especially, we saw during Super Bowl how the issue with human trafficking came to the forefront. What do you think the House of Representatives' role should be in helping to combat human trafficking in the state?
It really starts in the legislature when it comes to that. One of the things I can say I'm proud of as a Georgia Democrat is that the Democratic caucus has put 9 different bills to stop human trafficking and crimes against children in the last legislative session. Like, it's been a priority and it needs to continue to be a priority. When it comes to legislation, you think of it in 3 ways. One is we have to protect folks, right? That's education for our frontline folks, for doctors and healthcare settings, for barbers who may notice something. And then we have to protect our victims. And we have to find a way to make sure that once we identify them, that they're taken care of, both their healthcare, their mental health, where they're going to, their living situation, to make sure that, that, and then prosecution. Like, folks that are going to be involved, we have to make sure that we give our district attorneys the tools they need to go after, prosecute these folks, and throw them underneath the jail. And I will definitely do that.
Awesome. Do you think there are, because I know we covered a lot.
Yeah.
We got pretty deep on a couple of issues. Yeah. But are there any issues that we didn't discuss that you feel are important or you plan to address at the state capitol once elected?
Okay, so my platform is very simple. It has the 4 main components, because I knew as a freshman in the Georgia House, my opportunities to make an impact would be diminished a little bit because you're still learning the process. But the 4 things I'm really most passionate about is the rural high-speed internet, affordable health care, of course, supporting our public schools, and ending cannabis prohibition. But past that, a couple of issues that I really would like to work on is ending the anti-union laws in the state. For decades now, we've made it difficult to form and maintain unions. And the numbers show that folks in unions have make better money, they have better working conditions, they have better perks like paid sick leave, more vacation time, all the things that a union can have. Collective labor is help build the middle class in this country, and we need to make it easier for those folks to organize in Georgia. Um, and then one of the other issues that I really want to tackle is the state's governments. Lately, they've been writing laws that have made it more difficult for county governments to do their jobs, right? And we're talking about a financial thing here. They put down these unfunded mandates where they tell the county governments, y'all have to do these things, but we're not going to provide you the resources to do them. You just have to make them up. Well, in rural counties like ours, we have a smaller tax base. So if we have to do things like a good instance of voting machines, they brought them in there a lot. There's a lot more that goes to the new voting machines, like paper and supplies, that they're not compensated for. Well, that comes out of our pockets. And in Upson County, we have our sales tax, and then we have our property taxes. And homeowners will end up paying more just because the state will tell these folks, hey, you have to do these things, but we're not going to help you have the resources to do them. And that disproportionately affects folks in our area. So those two issues will be something I'll pay attention to after the big four, as I call them, get resolved.
Okay, that's awesome. I think those are issues that definitely need to be addressed. And actually, thank you for bringing those up because I didn't think to even equate how basically those unions essentially have been eroded um, with workers, as you said before, not really making the income that they could possibly have or having those benefits that they could have if they were able to unionize. So yeah, that's definitely an issue. Um, the last thing I want to touch on, and I think uh, what everyone is wondering, is why do you believe that you're the right candidate to serve your district?
Well, it's really the number one question, right?
Mm-hmm.
I have a God-given passion to do this. I mean, it's when you think about what will it take to be a good representative for your district in the Georgia House, to me, it's more than just about, hey, I'm the person that like shares your ideal, so just select me in a popularity contest type thing. I'm going to be an advocate for our district in the House. It's not enough to be elected and get there and take your pictures and, hey, I'm just happy to be here. And, I'll vote on legislation that I agree with, and I'll vote no on stuff I don't agree with. But how do you personally affect change? Like, can you reach across the aisle to get the support you need for the things that your district needs? And it's more than just a party-based issue. This is about, can you build the relationships? Can you be effective? Can you even put aside your own thoughts when it's for the good of the district? And that's what I'll bring to the table. I'll be someone that will, in Atlanta, that will work across the aisle, that will build those relationships, that will get things done. And I'm not about divisive politics. People want to argue about this issue or that issue, leave it on Facebook. When I get to the Georgia House, it's about our priorities and making sure they get accomplished.
Right. I so often people don't understand the work that goes on behind the scenes. You know, um, they see the things that are out there in public, but they don't see that the real work actually happens behind the scenes. And I actually just wanted to thank you because even with all of the work that I had been trying to do in our community, and you have always been encouraging and offering support, you know, for those different things. And I just want to thank you for that, because you didn't know me from, you know, some random person at the grocery store, but you took the time to actually reach out and say, hey, you know, let me know if there's anything I can help with and support you with. And I just really want to thank you for that, because that says so much about who you are, and also your heart for serving people as well. So thank you.
I appreciate that.
And I'm really glad that we were able to do this, so people can just see, you know, who you are as a person and an individual, and the awesome things that you're ready to champion once you're elected. But first, we have to do the work. We have to go to the polls and get you in there, you know, so that you can fight for us. And, you know, we know that you have our best interests at heart. So thank you so much for agreeing to do this chat with me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. And I want to let everyone know, if you want to find out more about me, my website is www.chrisbentonga.com. You'll find out more about me, my family, my priorities, give you a link to donate if you want to help financially or to volunteer. Always looking for volunteers. And all my social media is at Chris Benton GA. That's Facebook, that's Twitter, that's Instagram. And my email you'll find on my website, but it's chris@chrisbentonga.com. So reach out to me if you just want to give me feedback, or if you want to find out more about me. I'm always available.
Or if you need a sign.
If you need a sign, we have those too.
Okay. Thank you so much, Chris. I really appreciate you. And of course, you know, this isn't going to be the last time that we have a conversation, but I appreciate you for taking this time out with me today.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for having me.
Okay, goodbye.
Bye.